offering, I lit a candle for our intern minister, Aaron Eves. It's been such a wonderful opportunity for me to serve as Aaron's supervisor and mentor over the last year that he has been doing his internship. He wrote yesterday to the internship committee regarding his health, and I just wanted to share that with you as I light a candle on his behalf. Aaron tells us that over the last several weeks that he has realized that he cannot continue to perform his duties at MDUC at the level that he most wants and the congregation most deserves on the account of his health. So after some difficult deliberations, the ministerial team and Aaron have decided it best to go on leave for a time. So with flare-ups of his health and some family concerns back home, he's also decided that unfortunately he needs to withdraw from the summer minister position that he was really excited to begin at the end of June. So we are still planning to celebrate Aaron's service to this congregation over the last church year on June the 9th. So after worship on June the 9th, Aaron will be here and we will celebrate his service to the congregation, and we'll have an opportunity for formal goodbyes and farewells. He wants us to know that he's getting a lot of support from friends and family and health professionals, and it's been a blessing for him to have this time to be with us. So there is a candle there as I and we think about Aaron this morning. I sometimes come to the pulpit on a Sunday morning thinking, wow, it's all been said. What a beautiful worship service. Which it has been. It's just what an honor it is to have so many amazing voices heard from this pulpit and this chancel. When I think of Memorial Day for myself, I go back to my childhood. Growing up in Canada, we only had one day of honor and remembrance for those who served and died in armed conflict, and that was called Remembrance Day. Prior to the 1960s, it would have been called Armistice Day because it was held on November the 11th, and we always took moments for silence on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And the Royal Canadian Legion, the organization that organized veterans, would always have a poster and essay contest for school children. It was their way of encouraging children, of whom I was at the time, to take time to remember the sacrifices of that time. I can always remember that the Royal Canadian Legion would raise funds each year by selling poppies, poppies that brought to mind the poem that was written by Canadian soldier John McCrae that was titled In Flanders Fields. He would end the poem with, "If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep." An oft repeated poem on those remembrances days of my childhood, along with time for silence. We would wear those poppies on that particular Remembrance Day. So when I moved to the United States, I had to learn that there were 2 days. There was a Veterans Day that happened when Canadians would honor Remembrance Day on November the 11th, as well as Memorial Day. And I was appreciative of Michelle reminding us and me of the history of Memorial Day that goes back prior to the Civil War. I also learned a little bit about Memorial Day from a veterans group that is affiliated with the Democratic Socialists, and they write about Memorial Day. They say Memorial Day began as a consecration of war dead following our Civil War by recently freed people honoring their comrades who fought and died with the Union Army for their freedom. Its purpose was one of mourning, not celebration. It is only in this generation, they write, that it has become, in the mass culture of the United States of America, at least a festival for commerce and pageantry, far removed from any context for those who died and for those whose lives were forever changed by war. So they ask that we must not allow this to happen, that we don't need bumper stickers or parades, we need solidarity. It's organizations like Veterans for Peace who have served and witnessed to the horrors of war who continue to remind us the importance of memory. They remind us to honor those who have served and all those who have died, not as a way to glorify war, but as a reminder for our call to work for peace. I often hear in the context of Unitarian Universalist worship this notion that we are a community of memory and of hope, that we are a community that remembers our past, and one that remembers our past so that we can work for a future that doesn't repeat it, that we have hope embedded in that work of remembrance. Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel, in his Nobel Prize lecture in 1986, speaks to this idea of the importance of memory and of hope. When he spoke, he said that without memory, our existence would be barren and opaque, like a prison cell into which no light penetrates, like a tomb which rejects the living. If anything can, it is memory that will save humanity. For me, hope without memory is like memory without hope. He continues that the call of memory reaches us from the very dawn of history. No commandment figures so frequently, so insistently in the Bible. And it is incumbent upon us to remember the good we have received and the evil we have suffered. New Year's Day, Rosh Hashanah, and also, which is also called Yom HaZikaron, the Day of Memory. On that day, the Day of Universal Judgment, humanity appeals to God to remember, as our salvation depends on it. If God wishes to remember our suffering, he writes, all will be well. If he refuses, all will be lost. Thus, the rejection of memory becomes a divine curse, one that would doom us to repeat past disasters, past wars. He finishes with these thoughts. There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest. The Talmud tells us that by saving a single human being, humanity can save the world. We may be powerless to open all the jails and free all the prisoners, but by declaring our solidarity with one prisoner, we indict all jailers. None of us is in a position to eliminate war, but it is our obligation to denounce it and expose it in all of its hideousness. As war leaves no victors, only victims, personkind needs to remember more than ever a destruction only humanity can provoke, only humanity can prevent. It was helpful to hear both Rodney and Michelle talk about how we can hold multiple truths. Because there was a time in my life where I had decided that I didn't want to participate in what I thought had become a jingoistic or celebration of military prowess that was Remembrance Day or was Memorial Day. So I decided that I would withdraw from wearing a poppy or taking the time to remember. And it's always good to be reminded that I can hold multiple truths. As a Unitarian Universalist for some years, I know that as a faith, we have struggled with our commitment to those who serve, thinking that we could not support those who serve because we could not support the wars in which they served or the policies which led to that. But I have learned, and we have learned, that that is an untruth, unnecessary, as we can hold both, to honor and to celebrate and to support those who choose to serve, to remember those who have been lost in war, both soldiers, those who have decided to engage in military service, and civilians who are also the victims of our human conflicts. So to learn that I can hold those two truths together, to wear a poppy proudly as an engagement in that practice of memory and of hope. Brian Troutman, a U.S. Army veteran and a national board member of Veterans for Peace, writes about Memorial Day. He says that Memorial Day, again, a day originating as Decoration Day, has morphed into a day that conflates the memorialization of killed soldiers with the glorification of war. The perennial flag-waving, ultra-nationalist speeches, garish street parades, and hyper-consumerism of Memorial Day do not honor these soldiers. What might, however, is working to prevent future war and nurture peace, honoring their memory by not sending more people into harm's way and to kill and maim in wars based on lies. To have any chance at being effective, however, this work must include efforts aimed at increasing public awareness about the many causes and costs of war. And who better to do that than those who have that experience? And so on Memorial Day tomorrow, amongst the other activities that you are engaged in, I invite you to take a moment of memory and of hope. May we be reminded of our continuous endeavor to bring an end to violence and war. May Memorial Day be a day as intended to consecrate those who have died as a result of armed conflicts, both civilian and soldier. May they have not died in vain, and may all of their memories be a guide to us to a better world, a peaceful, humane, and just world, a world where those who have died in the seemingly endless human conflict could have lived the lives that they gave. And so, as we end this morning, I wanted to invite anyone who is currently serving in military service or has in the past to stand in body and or spirit so that we might acknowledge your service. Is anybody here who has served or is serving? Would you stand, please?